welcome to the Introverted Business Experience. This here is Matt Singer, who is well known for, well, his management skills in general. He has helped many people, including me, including Matt Diggity. But Matt, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Sure, Brent. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I do lots of fun things, build lots of businesses, and have a lot of fun doing it. My core passion, as you mentioned, is really very much about management and really helping people grow and scale, because so many people, particularly in the world of SEO, start a company, hire some people, don't really know how to manage them well, don't really know how to hire the right people,
Yeah.
and they often struggle with those aspects, right? So it's really fun helping them. And yeah, I've worked with lots of cool people, work with Ahrefs, work with a bunch of people like Matt, Kyle, Kurt Phillip, lots of good, amazing people that have ended up building very, very good companies after they've sort of learned to hire really well and manage the staff they have. So that's what I do.
Awesome, awesome. Now I will get right into it because my first question obviously is why management? Is that something you went to school for? Is that something you just had a passion for when you were younger? Is that like why management?
Well, I nearly graduated high school, so I'm not sure that's where I learned my management skills. But no, I started my career very early when I was 18. I started working and so on, and very quickly got into the field of management and spent a lot of time and effort sort of learning management and yeah, figuring out how to manage people. And I spent about 12 years in the corporate world, working with some of the biggest companies like IBM and Xerox and so on, which was fantastic and have been extremely helpful. I own 5 businesses now, and the only reason I've been able to build up so many companies and hire lots and lots of people is because I came into the entrepreneurial game with a lot of management experience, right? There's a lot of things to learn when you're an entrepreneur, and definitely have had plenty of challenges, but the ability to manage people really well and so on just makes the entrepreneurial journey so much easier. So
Yeah, I can see that management in general, knowing who to hire and well, training is a big part of it. That is very important, right?
yeah. Yeah, and actually a big thing is that you'll see a lot of business owners hiring great people, and then eventually as their company grows, they want to promote people into management roles. And the challenge is they're not often a good manager themselves, and they're then promoting people into management roles that doesn't have much experience either. And yeah, without training, it often takes quite a while to get through a lot of the humps, right? So just like hiring a coach for personal training and so on, hiring a management coach is very beneficial as well for the same reasons, right? So you can basically skip a lot of all the sort of simple and basic learning steps. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I run quite a few business myself nowadays, and one of the things that I've seen is the most impactful because when Sarush and I, for people that don't know this, I ran a agency with Sarush Khan. He's an amazing guy, a little bit well known in the SEO community, not necessarily too well known. He knows his stuff. But our agency in itself was just two guys winging it. um, but I quickly identified that we had problems there. So when we ended our ways in a good terms, of course, I decided to focus more on the management part. First, I read a book, 4 Hour Work Week, which I heard mixed reviews about, but I actually thought it was amazing. And one of the first things I noticed is I was hiring people and expecting them to be able to do the work without proper training. So I was like, okay, I hired an SEO. Now you know SEO, right? But in a lot of cases, even when they are signing on as an SEO, they don't know which process to follow, what to do. And that was my biggest hurdle, I would say. That's why I take my SOPs so um, serious, because they like the more detailed they are, the easier they are to follow, the less work you'll actually have focusing on that. Good training is really important. What you say that that's a big problem in general is people hiring people, expecting them just to do the job instead of providing them with guidance.
I mean, the big challenge with most business owners is they think they can go and hire someone like themselves at a relatively low cost, right? And reality is, so one of the big things that entrepreneurs often don't get right is that organizations exist for the specialization of labor, right? You're fundamentally not wanting to duplicate yourself. Because the problem is, even if you find someone like yourself, or you spend 3 years training someone that knows all the stuff you know, the problem is, one, the business is relying on them. If they leave, you're fucked, right? Number two, again, it will take you 3 years to train someone more, right? So the whole purpose of organizations and the reason businesses exist is fundamentally for specialization of labor. And what that means is that you really want to break down things, and you want to look at it at a more granular level and say, what is the processes within this, and how can I train someone up in a month to be good at doing something here? So, for example, teaching someone how to do link building outreach, that's a process. And teaching someone how to do that, you can probably train that in a month. Or training someone how to write content, or training someone how to do content research, or figuring out what content to write about. Those individual pieces you can probably do in a month. So you're much better hiring a person to do one thing and do it really, really well, relatively quickly, and then learning and getting experience, rather than teaching people a whole array of skills and trying to make them understand everything in a short span of time.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I was working on my processes, the first time I had this big ass list of processes, step one till step 40, but I noticed quickly that that caused problems. And my solution at the time was, I could also break this up in different um, subjects, like, for example, let's say link building, content, schema. And ever since I did that, now I have somebody who specializes at schema. I also have somebody who focuses on link building. And doing that actually works far better for me than giving them an entire row of SOPs because they have their
Totally.
own thing to well specialize in, and I find that to be far more efficient. Uh,
Yeah, totally. But another key thing is, it's not necessarily the same people who are great at the same things. So all people have natural sort of strength and weaknesses. People are different, right? And fundamentally, what I'm great at is not necessarily what someone else is naturally great at. Some people look at an Excel sheet and just get it, and some people look at an Excel sheet and get dizzy, right? So the whole point is that people have different strengths. And for example, someone that you're wanting to do guest post outreach, like the ideal personality from that is probably a different person than someone you want to do schema. Like, yes, they could probably do similar both things, but if you hire someone who's really good and really driven at doing guest post outreach, they're probably significantly better at that. And again, I should say, if they're just doing that, they will relatively quickly get really good at that skill, rather than trying to learn 3 or 4 or 5 different things at the same time.
exactly, exactly. I totally agree, and it's actually something that that is quite tricky as well. Is identifying what somebody is good at because it's not always as apparent as they are really driven in this. For example, it took a lot of test and trial to figure out who was going to be my schema guy. I switched it around a lot because back then I was in micromanagement mode. I knew I had a problem, I had to fix it, and the quickest way for me to do that was to analyze the results of the labor. um, but I like it's not just the quality of the work that matters, it's also how happy somebody is in the position that I gave them, so that I know that it's something they actually enjoy doing. Because if they enjoy doing it, then I know one, they're going to do it for a longer time, but two, they're going to be driven enough to keep doing it. So that was also quite important. But that's something tricky to get used to because it's you have to find out who likes what, and it's a lot of trial and error. Unless, well, I don't know, is there some specific way you would say to actually find that out?
Yes, very, very simple. So this is one of the first things I teach people in my management training, right? Is really about learning to understand people and understand their natural behaviors, because all of us come with certain behaviors and so on. And for example, similarly, if you're looking for someone to do schema, right? That's very granular work, it's very detail oriented, and you need someone who, it's not just something you wing, you want to get it right,
Yeah.
right? So the kind of person you want there are similar people to accountants, to developers, and stuff like that. So people who are very detail oriented, people who are great with data and very logical, right? And when you know how to work with humans, it's very, very easy to identify those type of people, right? But they are often different than people I would prefer to use for something like guest posting, for example, because for guest posting, it doesn't matter if they send a couple of emails to the wrong address or whatever, right? Like the goal with guest posting is send out a shit ton of emails and get a quantity of results, right? Whereas when you're dealing with schema, you don't want mistakes, right? So it's two different types of personality that typically get you the optimal results. But I use a framework called DISC, sort of DISC behavior, to help identify it. And the beautiful thing about DISC compared to most other personality models and so on is the fact that when you learn to understand DISC, you can actually, just by looking at a person and looking at their behavior, you can actually understand what type of personality they have, and therefore understand if they would be particularly good at that type of work, right? So even within a minute or two of starting interviewing someone, you already know, do they have the right personality for this job? And if they have the personality, then it's more a question of seeing, do you have the experience that you want? Do they have a cultural fit and so on? But figuring out if the personality is the right type of person is relatively easy when you learn how to understand human behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's also quite interesting in general. Especially like I enjoy learning more about personalities in general. That's always interests me. But what I often notice, especially when growing my team, is I don't have any process on finding the personalities, or I will be working on that now because I didn't know that that was really something you could map out. But what I really notice is I just throw them in the pool, right? Like I immediately let them do work, and the reason for that is this way I can be like, all right, this person, I can see that, let's say Google Stacks take way longer, so I'm not going to let them do that because there's a reason it takes way longer, you know. But also continuous interviewing, I continuously ask them why, like, how are you feeling on the subject, because I need my people not only to like what they're doing but also to be hungry enough to, as I help every employee build a side hustle, I help them also build a side hustle in what they do, because I want to grow together. That's really important for me, but that's not possible if they're not hungry enough.
So one key thing that's important to understand is people learn differently, right?
Yeah,
So some people you'll give a task, and even before you're done talking, they will jump in and start doing.
yeah, that's me.
Other people, that's you exactly. Other people need to kind of understand things first. So some people want to get like the training, they want to go through everything and really they're often a bit afraid to make mistakes, right? So they're more likely to they're wanting to double check and really understand what they're doing before they start doing it, right?
Yeah.
So definitely testing people initially can be very beneficial, but it is really important to understand that people operate and function slightly different, right?
That's
and
right.
and what that means is that just because someone is maybe not the fastest at doing something, or maybe because they don't jump out to it straight away, doesn't mean that they're not necessarily good at it, right? It just means that they might be someone that will learn slightly different. So yeah.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, Brent, you're doing exactly what most business owners do. You're treating people like yourself. Yeah, I noticed
Yeah.
it while talking. That's definitely a problem. Because I am indeed somebody who, like, I rather start and learn along the way, because I know that mistakes are doable. Like they are
Yeah.
going to happen. But a lot of cases that isn't the case. Most, like, there are people who don't think like that. And I really didn't stop to think about that, which is stupid because now I realize, yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. So yeah.
So here's the thing. Again, for some jobs, the personality you have is great. So, like your kind of personality, I love that for people, for us that do outreach, for example. So, in my SEO company, where we're building our own sites, growing them, and flipping them, right? I love those kind of people for outreach because they just jump out, they try a bunch of stuff, they outreach to a lot of people, and effectively they end up getting results. Right. I don't care if they make mistakes or send the wrong email or screw something up. Like it doesn't matter. Right. But if you're dealing with a developer that accidentally no indexes a site, or if you're dealing with an accountant that sends the wrong invoices to the wrong people and stuff like that, obviously everyone can make mistakes, but there's definitely certain roles where there's more space for making mistakes than others, right?
Certain mistakes, they actually could affect you greatly. Like a wrong email doesn't affect you, but a wrong invoice could hurt your reputation. A bad accountant could hurt your business. So yeah, there's definitely a grade in mistakes that you can or can't make, and which require a different approach in general. So different personality, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
um yeah,
So,
something.
so here's the thing. I would never hire you as an accountant,
No,
right?
that's a good
Be- be-
idea.
because here's the thing: when you're dealing with those kind of numbers, you want to make very sure that it's someone who double, triple checks that the numbers are correct,
Yeah.
right? And you're just not patient enough to do that, right? Like you would do it, you would get it done, but like you don't have the patience to do that, right? So the whole thing is like you want different kinds of people for different types of roles, and often, particularly early on in business, that's what people often screw up, right? Like I have so many people that come to our VA company. They're like, yeah, I would like someone who's a developer and a graphic designer and a video editor and an accountant and these like 7 different things. And you're like, no, you're talking about 3 different humans here. Like you're not going to get someone who's great at all of these things in one, right?
No,
So yeah.
I get that. I just never thought that personality would indeed be so impactful. But now that I think of it, it's actually rather an interesting field because what you say makes a lot of sense. Um, as yeah, while I am an analytical guy, for me it's more so about results because I believe that mistakes are there to learn from. But obviously, like I had one time my first partner was holy shit, a guy named David Payne, and he was totally incompetent in his job. I knew that, but he deleted accidentally the client's website. The entire database.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, luckily I foresaw it, so I recovered it. Looked like a hero. Great. Um, but now that I think of it, it was just not his thing to do. He wasn't supposed to be in that position to work with the website in the first place, because yeah, for him the mistake was, well, something that's easily fixable, which it wouldn't be if it wasn't for me. I make backups, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, that's something I really need to start mapping out.
Yeah.
Well, what's also very interesting is now you're really, really good at management things. You have already proven that just by talking about it. And of course, your results speak for itself, but you also run an SEO summit, don't you?
I run a lot of companies, yes, but one of them is a SEO summit. So we run both online and now live events as well. So we are having a huge summit taking place in Saigon in Vietnam here in March. And yeah, again, we're having lots of amazing speakers. So doing yeah, it's there have been a one event here in Saigon about 4 or 5 years back, but it's definitely the first one for a while, and we're really trying to bring in all the big guns. So we're having lots and lots of really amazing speakers. So we're having a couple of my favorites: Kyle Roof, Matt Diggity, Dom Welsh, Charles Float, Adam Smith from the Niche Guys. We're having Korai come along. Lots and lots of really, really amazing speakers that are really gonna put on a kick-ass event, right? So one of the big things, and this is particularly for SEOs, right? Like SEOs generally don't understand the value of networking. They love sitting behind their computer and behind their screen and doing their SEOing. But reality is that if you want to succeed and if you want to be great, not just at doing SEO, but in business, networking is the number one, right? I was just at Charles Float's mastermind here in Phuket a couple of weeks back. And, every time you get around with a bunch of amazing people, like you just see amazing growth, right? And I brought some of my staff along and so on, and yeah, it's just amazing growth. It's amazing opportunities, and you start talking about things, you start thinking about things in a different way than you do when you're just sitting at home staring at the screen yourself, right? So
Yeah, funny, because I never believed. Well, I know the value of networking, right? I do. It's because of my network that I am even relatively successful. It's because I had great people always backing me up, even though I never like I went to one conference in my entire life. And it was a French one. So I did not understand anybody there because I don't speak French. I just went because my client was going and he asked, Brent, do you want to go with me? First, I was hesitant, but I thought, oh no, I will wait. And even though it was French, I left that location without understanding anybody, right? I left that conference with two big clients, a white label client. So they sent me consistent work. So I would definitely say that in general, going to conferences is a very important thing for your business in general. Like what I love in America, this is very popular, is people actually come together at bars or in Chiang Mai, if you see the video of Matt Bigley post with Kyle Roof just speaking randomly there, that's amazing. In Belgium, that's less frequent, and I would also say that the level of entrepreneurs, online entrepreneurs in Belgium, is way lower because it's still in the uptick here. Like there are great Belgian entrepreneurs, right? Great, but majority is at a steady level, and it's less frequent. I would like I know people who go out every Sunday to organizations, where they can meet each other. I think that's genius. That's really good because you get to know new people, and even if they don't necessarily impact your business in the beginning, the ROI is there in the sense of knowing them alone is very valuable. You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I stayed in the UK where there's some great groups of amazing people, right? I mean, the people like James Dooley, for example, that are great at pulling crowds together, and I mean, we have so many great masterminds and networking events and so on, right? One of my recommendations to people and to you as well, start utilizing LinkedIn a little bit. Start just go on LinkedIn, look at your city where you're living, search for people who do SEO. Just once or twice a month, shoot someone an email and say, hey, I can see you also do SEO. Let's drink a cup of coffee, right? If you just extend your network a little bit by bit, you will get to know more people and you'll realize there's more people doing things like you around you, right? I do it a lot when I travel. I mean, I speak at conferences all over the world. I travel a lot, probably half the year, so I spend on the road. And every time I'm in a new city, I always look up who lives here. I always love opening LinkedIn and just putting in CEOs or SEOs or whatever I'm interested in, and just seeing who's living here. And I often fire out a handful of emails and say, hey, you look super interesting. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's have dinner, whatever. And I've met so many amazing people all around the world just doing that.
Yeah, something I noticed when using LinkedIn is actually like not that long ago I had a job offer as a SEO manager. So that's something I get frequent, people reaching out to me. Um, I was even asked to speak in Brussels before COVID, which I didn't. Because I think conferences and all are really cool. My main issue with conferences, and I told you this too, is I'm the type of guy I want to I want people to go home with the idea of I learned something new, you know. And often, in a lot of cases, when people speak, it's a self-promotional pitch. And I believe my marketing strategy in general is value backed. So I overshare all the fucking time my language, and I have this because that's something I like from Gary Vee. Right, he goes really in depth, and the main reason why I like that is if people wanted to apply this themselves, are they really your ideal audience if they're going to apply it yourself? You know, most people hire a marketeer not because they can't learn it themselves, but because it's not feasible for them to spend that time learning it, you
Yeah.
know? So I think sharing a lot of value proves that you know your stuff. And in a lot of SEO conferences or marketing conference for in general, a lot of the strategies shared, in my opinion, aren't applicable by anybody. You know, not just anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's always suited for a specific situation and a certain budget. That's something I always wanted to change. Want to bring something to the table that everybody that saw it could go home with. That's the issue with SEO. I think it's a lot of rehashed stuff. You know, in the end, the landscape is always changing, but the macros remain the same, and your strategies will often just change based on the macros. So it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense for people to do that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't frequent SEO conferences is mainly that. Although I shouldn't really go for the SEO part, but more so the networking part. So that's wrong on my side. Yeah.
Here, reality is that, I mean, people sometimes share things at conferences you don't see elsewhere, right? So the way I look at it is when you're sitting at a conference and you're listening to speakers, one benefit is that you start talking with other like-minded people about the presentation, and you can often learn a lot from that itself, right? But honestly, majority of the benefit from being at a conference is the people you end up being around, right? So I totally agree with you. Like when people are just doing promotional pitches, like one, they don't actually get much business out of it, and two, they're not necessarily having people walk up to them and say, "Wow, you're amazing," right? Or wanting to connect with them and so on. The thing is, I totally agree with you. Share value, right? Share something people can use. That's what I do all the time. And the thing is, I honestly, I don't care if people buy from me or not, but my focus is if I can help them make a difference, right? And I've done that to a lot of people. If I can help make a huge difference in their business, like eventually they'll remember me. And if someone else asks for management advice, eventually they'll probably refer me or send them in my direction, right? So I don't have a particular need for people to necessarily go and buy my stuff. That's not my goal. My goal is simply to make a difference, right? And if you go to a conference with that same thing, if you get an opportunity to speak and you go and add value, often my experience is you'll actually make even more money from it, because reality is when you actually not trying to push stuff, not desperately selling stuff, but you're actually sharing value, then you put yourself in a different situation. You put yourself in a different level, and people are eager to talk with you, right? Because the whole point, as you said, it's about showing that you know your stuff, right? If you show you know your stuff, so for example, if you go to a conference in your local area, if a bunch of people see that you know your stuff and they're at a similar level to you or slightly above or slightly below or whatever, they're more likely to come up and talk to you and say, "Hey, Brent, we do the same thing. Let's connect. Let's meet some more frequently. Let's have some great conversations." And that's the value. Like the biggest value in conferences and physical events is the people you meet. That is the value. And I can tell you, like I've been at many conferences all over the world, and one of the events that probably been the biggest game changer for me was probably 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. I was at a conference in Bali called DMSS, where after the event we were 4 or 5 days in a resort with a whole bunch of probably 20, 30 people. And I ended up spending a bunch of days mostly in a pool, but talking a lot of SEO with people like Kyle Roof and Charles Flood and Gail Breton and some of these people that are super knowledgeable. And we ended up spending 4 or 5 days in a hotel just hanging out and chilling and so on, right? And it's been so game changing just to meet other great people like that.
Yeah, for people listening that don't know Charles Float, because I talked about Kyle Roof a lot, Charles Float is basically, I would say, one of those guys that is very well known overall because he knows his stuff. Like I believe he owned the link building company that he eventually sold to, um, what's his name, Gary?
Gary, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I forget his last name. But yeah, Charles is very well known. He's very active on Twitter, shares games 99% of the time, and overall just really knows his stuff. In SEO, you often see the difference really quickly between somebody who knows their stuff and who doesn't. Like yesterday, I was talking with Ted Kabaitis, from Cora.
yeah.
That
I,
guy,
I've I've also done masterminds with Ted, and yeah,
yeah, he knows his stuff. But what I really like about that is that, like, a lot of SEOs, they believe in their strategies, but it's not really based on more than beliefs, and that focuses on evidence. That's focused on data driven evidence. And that's where you quickly see the difference in quality of SEO. And Charles Float is definitely in the top leagues. So if you get to meet people like Charles Float, that in general is, well, it's worth your while, I think.
yep,
Yeah. Another guy I would really like to meet in real life is Craig. Um,
yep,
he's always been a form of a mentor for me. Always helped me out with Garrett Dane as well, which is weird because Garrett hasn't been very active lately, but he used to be really booming. Helped me a lot. Actually, Garrett Dane was my first gig I ever did. I did a
yep,
link building job for $7 an hour, and the only reason I took that job was to learn the concept of link building, because that was my biggest hurdle at the time. I think most beginning SEOs struggle with link building because we overcomplicate it in our heads. I think that's something that's very frequent. People see something and it's too simplistic, so they start overcomplicating it. But when I built my first link, I was flabbergasted by how easy it was. That I literally said, like, SEO is easy. That's the kind of guy I was. But then people like Kyle Roof shattered my world with their software, Page Optimizer Pro and Cora. So yeah, knowing these people is definitely of value, and it's something I plan to do more. I have a lot on my plate now with the podcast and overall networking becoming more valuable to me. So I would say, yeah, if I would go to conferences, it's more so for people than for the speakers.
yeah,
That's that. Yeah, I don't really like the idea of speakers, but I do love the idea of masterminds. Mastermind Mansion, for example. I think that's a genius idea. Of course,
yep,
conferences are quite useful. Like I've seen your conference, I've seen some of the speakers there. Terry Samuels also, I believe, was on there.
yep.
Those guys are very knowledgeable and they're known to share a lot of value. But that's also, I think, because these kind of people, they know their stuff and they're not scared to overshare. That's something I love about, well, watching your summit online in general. I think that's really cool.
And here's the thing: reality is a lot of people share a lot more when you're in person, right? When you're like having someone do a presentation, they often share good stuff, but there's often things that people hold back, right? Because reality is a lot of SEOs make their money from doing SEO. So they're not necessarily going to give away all their secrets to everyone around them all the time, right?
Uh,
But again, if you're having a drink with someone or you're having dinner with someone, they're a lot more likely to share a lot more stuff than if you're just sitting and listen to a YouTube video of them or the likes, right? So again, my experience is just you get so much more value from meeting people in person compared to just seeing them online or whichever, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it's always valuable to know people in general. Like I again with the podcast, it proved me exactly that point, because you need guests to appear. But luckily enough, I knew people who were willing to appear, like Israel. Israel got it. Yourself. So yeah, that's really really cool. That if you know people, they they're sometimes willing to help you out too. And in general, that's gonna affect your business greatly. And if you are an SEO, then yeah, you should be going to these conferences and wait for after hours. Like get to know the people that are speaking, or general overall people who are there, because in a lot of cases a lot of great people go, but they're not specifically speaking, but they know their stuff.
One of the things I really like, I mean, if you go to the UK, right, there's a lot of like SEO events. Like we sometimes go a bunch of people to like SEO Brighton SEO and things like that. And yeah, there's a bunch of people, but reality is most of them work in agencies, and some of them know a few things, but it's generally not like the crowd you're going to learn the most from. The whole thing, and my sort of key reason for doing an event half the way around the world is really because the people who actually take the time and effort to travel to the other side of the world to hang out with people, those are the people. Like if you spend 500 bucks on a flight and spend a couple $100 in a hotel and stuff like that, right? Like you're serious about learning and you're serious about meeting great people. So the events we have and the type of people that show up are always just mind-blowingly good, right? And that's why like I love doing these kind of events. So yeah.
Why Vietnam though? Like I believe you said Vietnam, is that where you're currently
Yep. That's I have a couple of favorite places out here. I love spending time in Chiang Mai, but as you know, Matt often have an event in Chiang Mai, and I think for me it's just as much just showing people more of Asia. Asia is a great place and lots of great opportunities out here. So yeah, that's just showing more of the world. I think we might actually run the event in different cities around the world going forward, but we haven't locked ourselves in for anything yet, but that is definitely a big possibility. But again, my focus is really giving people the opportunity to come and network with amazing humans and really do something that makes a significant difference in the business, right?
do you personally live in Asia? Yeah, right.
Yeah, most of the year. So I travel a lot because I speak a lot all over the place. So typically I'm in US, Canada, Mexico in sort of April, May. Then in June, July, August, I tend to be in Europe when it's not too cold. And then the rest of the year, I tend to be sort of in Asia. So between Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. So yeah.
Now, since you travel and speak all over the place, where would you say as an SEO would be the best place for you to be, to, or as a business owner, not even SEO, the best place to get value? Would it be more so the US,
It,
Canada?
it totally it totally depends what you're doing. It depends where you are in your travel. It depends on I mean it depends on a lot of things, right? There's definitely, I mean, living out here in Asia a lot of the year, there's definitely a lot of people out here that are doing really amazing things. One of the benefits with Asia is the fact that you can often do a lot more for a lot less, which means starting up companies and so on. In Europe, when you're hiring one employee, so on, right, you need to make a lot of money to be able to afford your first employee and your second employee. And it often takes quite a bit longer to grow and scale, right? Whereas the benefits with hiring in Asia is often the fact that you can hire much earlier. And again, if you're building good processes, if you have good workflows, right, you can often scale your businesses or your businesses significantly faster. So a lot of the people out here are really growing extremely fast, right? And they're building up really, really big businesses in a very short span of time. And I find that very exciting. Some people have this idea that it only makes sense if you don't have any money, but reality is a lot of people making millions and millions are much preferring staying out here just for the sake of ability to grow and even lifestyle, right? Like out here, you can have a personal driver, and you can do everything. You can build yourself a much simpler life and get a lot more support and so on, so that you can focus on the things you're doing in a much easier way than you can in Europe
No,
So,
definitely. Yeah, hiring somebody in Europe requires a big budget. Well, a big budget. If you're a startup company, that's gonna be difficult for you to do. So
well,
yeah,
it just take longer, right? Like if you need to make another 5 grand to pay someone every month, like it takes you longer than if you can hire earlier and get cost effective labor that can do the work, right? But get cost effective labor and the whole thing is that a lot of the time small businesses end up being able to hire more people locally, right? When they grow, but in the beginning, growing in the Western world is often very difficult and takes a long time. So getting the business off the ground and so on is much easier in lower cost locations, right?
no, definitely, definitely. Asia is definitely on my top list to go to. Um, that's very interesting overall. But what I'm really interested in is what was your favorite place to speak at so far?
I'll say Chiang Mai SEO is probably where I had the most fun speaking. Matt Diggity's event. That was it was a super fun event, and it was one of those things that, yeah, it was a great crowd. I love the crowd of SEO. So even though my background is in management and that's my core focus, I did build my first SEO sites myself when back in 2007. So that was when I made my first affiliate income and so on. So I have been in the affiliate world and in the SEO world nearly as long as I've been in the management realm. So I love both very much. And again, similar concept, right? Like when people travel all the way around to the world to go to Asia, the quality of the crowd is just it's higher, right? So people who make $500 a month is not going to travel halfway around the world to be at a conference. So just the pure quality of the people there is fantastic.
No, I can definitely understand that, but also, like, I can see why SEO conferences would have you as a speaker, especially management wise, since I would say that that's where most SEOs lack at. You know, is
100%, one
yeah,
hundred
most
percent.
of us we see outsourcing as outsourcing, but we don't really know like hiring is really difficult for a lot of people, a lot of SEOs. So I can see why you would be so popular, especially since you know your stuff on it, you know, like really well. I can see why that's so important for people and actual incentive for them to come is because that's a major pain point, I would say.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. I can definitely see that, especially Chiang Mai. I've heard great things about it. I planned to go, didn't go. Um, but then Matt Diggity, for people who don't know this, Matt is an absolute legend at what he does. And if you haven't checked out the lab yet, you are missing out. It's an amazing course. Speaking about courses, are you ever planning to release one on management?
I have one already. So I have one that I've been, yeah, it's probably been working on it about 3 4 years by now. And it's, yeah, very popular. And again, a lot of SEOs love going through it because
Yeah.
it's I've tried to make it not too long because business owners and SEOs, they're all busy, right? So I've really taken the most important lessons and really condensed it down to sort of the 80/20 of management so that you don't have to spend forever. I think it's 5 6 hours or so, the course itself. Obviously, implementing takes longer, but the course itself is not too long, so it's something people can get a hold of and can start doing in not too long, right? So that's yeah, that's great, and lots of good feedback on it already.
Yeah, that makes sense because I believe, and I might be wrong, that Sarush mentioned this to me. Um, I just
Very
haven't been
likely.
that active in groups overall, as I was basically growing myself, and I'm the kind of guy I learn from mistakes. You know, that's what I do. Um, so I figured a lot of it out myself. But yeah, it's really cool. I didn't even know that was going on, which I should have known. Would
All
you
good.
recommend it like to what kind of people would you recommend it to in general? Like I'm very popular in, let's say, specific industries where hiring in general is a problem, but this is more so it's not hiring VAs in this case, right? It's
Well, honestly, it's the same thing. I mean, if you're, I don't care what kind of people you hire. Honestly, like when you're hiring people, fundamentally, people is resources, and when you're hiring resources, when you're adding resources to your team, then you need to know how to do it well. So if you're hiring great VAs, that will get you. I mean, fundamentally, it's people, right? So I have clients with some of our VAs that where the VAs is literally running their company, right? So a lot of the time, the biggest challenge people have is they look at VAs as low cost labor, and they often don't take them serious enough. And obviously, if you don't treat people serious enough, then they're only ever going to be so good, right? But I have Filipinos that I would hire 10 times out of 10 over some of the Western staff I've had, right? So for me, it's not really a question of Filipinos can only do this or that, but it's more a question of labor and manpower overall. And that's definitely some labor that makes sense to have near shore, right? So that's labor that makes sense to have in the US and Canada and Europe. And we have some staff there, particularly sales, like people who go and actually visit clients and so on. Much better to have people on the ground for that. But also at the same time, just as many roles where having people remotely is much more cost effective and so on, right?
Oh, definitely. Now we're running out of time, but I want to tell you that like this means a lot to me. You appearing, thank you so much. I've learned a great deal already, and I'm just very excited to start learning more about personalities in general. See how I can implement that. Um, but before we go, is there some place that people can check out your course and you want them to know?
Yeah, I mean, many good things, right? So my course specifically is mattsingers.com. That's the best place to have a look at that. Again, really encourage people to come along to the SEO Mastery Summit.com. And as I said, that's gonna happen and gonna take place in March next year. So in about 3-4 months or so. And that's going to be in Vietnam. So again, if you're serious about your SEO, if you want to meet other amazing people, definitely a great place to come along as well.
Yeah, I might consider going myself. So who
Cool.
knows? All right, thank you
Excellent.
so much for appearing. It means the world to me. Like seriously, it was very nice to hear that you were willing to appear. That means a lot to me, especially since Saruj and I learned a lot from you in general. Um, yeah, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure and always love sharing.
Awesome. Bye bye.
Oh boy.